Yes, we're going to be going over Alex O'Connor's debate with Michael Knowles, the full one, not just the 6-minute clip. They released the hour-and-a-half long one, and I want to do it. So that is what we are going to be going over here. Steel yourselves, chat, because it is gonna be a bumpy ride. Also, folks, I'm probably, just a heads up, probably not going to stream tomorrow. There was a schedule turnaround, so tomorrow is my my day off. So here we go. Just letting you know. Boop.
Michael Knowles, welcome to Within Reason.
Alex, thank you for having me.
We have unfinished business, I think. The last time I saw you will have been in this cigar bar in Nashville. We were out there filming for a Catholic mass, a traditional Latin mass organization, and I was something.
Yeah, no, Alex O'Connor tends to be a pretty good egg. I like his videos a lot. He's very thoughtful. He comes from like a philosophy background. He has like degrees in philosophy and such. And I like his takes on things, and he tends to be able to maintain a very measured approach to debate, which I find useful for cutting through, bullshit.
The token or resident atheist. I say that, I mean, they treated me very well, and I had a very good time filming this project, but I think I might have been the only atheist in the room, and so the conversation at dinner was really interesting, in particular when we briefly got onto the subject of America as a Christian nation. I think we had about a few sentences each, and then swiftly moved on to other things. So I was hoping we could sort of pick that back up again, but do so in the fine company of my
this guy ruined Peter
Hitchens. I was hoping that
the
unfinished business would be the scotch and the cigars, but I suppose the conversation is fine enough. So yes, that's a very important question, because I know you've been traveling around the States, but in recent months, this notion of Christian nationalism, this grand debate over the religious origins of America, has become the hobby horse of the left. I think that the Democrats think this will be one of their best chances to really beat Trump in November. So it's come into prominence, and a lot of both sides are making lots of claims that seem dubious and only lightly related to historical reality. But it reminds one of the line of Ronald Reagan, our opponents are not so much ignorant as they know so many things that aren't so. And in America, to quote a fellow British atheist, Christopher Hitchens, he observed that Americans just never read history ever. So unfortunately, the consequence of that is that people don't know even our own founding history.
And also, unfortunately, people like Michael Knowles can merely state things without actually citing evidence, and conservatives will just believe that because it's told to them authoritatively, despite the fact that it is not accurate.
Having said that, that's the self-same Christopher Hitchens who would have not so much died, but probably won on the hill of arguing that America was in no way a Christian nation. Whether or not he was correct is another question. Whether he would have won the argument, I think, is undeniable, depending on who it was he was talking to. That's another thing that we had in common, our shared suspicion of Christopher Hitchens as a philosophical thinker, although I think I'm a little more charitable towards him in terms of his overall influence over my thinking than you would be. But I think there are two ways of approaching this question. As you say, recently we have a conversation that takes let's say a more political
Ghetto Spock,
tone.
still I appreciate it. Thank you so
this
much.
description of Christian nationalism as a sort of right-wing danger to the fabric of America, in the way that a lot of right-wingers will see left-wing radical wokists as a danger to the fabric of America. And so the focus is, I suppose, maybe more on the nationalism part than the Christian part. But there's also just this historical question, which is the one that I'm more interested in.
I mean, Rob Laughlin, it'd be nice if, like, Christian nationalists could be dissuaded by facts, but the very nature of them being Christian nationalists kind of precludes them from being persuaded by facts.
Which is less about, let's say, the danger of people who today believe in the existence of God and the risks that they might pose to American democracy, whatever that might mean. But whether the country that you're in is best described in a historical sense as a Christian nation. And I've heard you say before that it is, and I've heard you use
White
Aw.
name anime eye gleam.
Ms. Milena, thank you very much for gifting a sub to Ghetto Spock and for adding your name to the list of stream supporters who are not transphobic. That's Sweet Miss Music, Winby, Ms. Milena, Erica, and Ozchunk. Only people I can prove are not transphobic.
use phrases like the soul of America is Christian and saying things like this. And
Also, we already covered this, and I'm very irritated that we're going to go over it again, but for what, the 8th time? But you know what? For the sake of this full segment, I'm going to do it anyway.
suppose the first thing I wanted to clarify is I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if you do
Aw,
say that
Ms.
America is a
Milena, no
Christian nation, or
transphobia, no
perhaps ought to be a Christian
self-transphobia,
nation,
okay?
are you talking
Not
here
allowed, against the
legally,
rules.
like in terms of the documents, the Constitution, or are you just talking about the, say, the culture or something like that, or the
Hey,
philosophy
Entrama.
undergirding the legal element of this conversation?
I don't always neatly separate these two things. I know that some American libertarians are fond of saying that, politics is totally distinct from culture or something like that. I think that's all a little bit silly. I think what we're talking about here when we talk about the soul of a country is a nation's constitution, capital C, and a nation's constitution, lowercase c. And that laws and customs and taboos and ends and goals are not so neatly separable. So
Yeah, but the thing is that you're talking about, you're making a case for Christian nationalism, which is a blending of, perhaps you can grant like a dominant religious belief with the state itself, and that is a recipe for danger for a wide variety of reasons. Not the least of which is that there are plenty of people in this country that do not believe those things.
another problem, I suppose, with Americans being a little dismissive of history is that we pick arbitrary dates to start looking at our own history. So typically, Americans look at 1776, or else, a little over a decade later at the
Oh wow, it's so interesting that Michael Knowles recognizes that the founding events of America actually go back farther than 1776. Just out of curiosity, oh, Michael Knowles, 1619. He made a video called "The Academic Freedom Hoax," and the 1619 project is based on a lie. Interesting stuff from the guy who's like, history goes back beyond 1776. Interesting.
Constitutional Convention, and they will say, this is the beginning of America. But it does cause one to ask, well, hold on, where did those people come from? How did they get there? And so America begins a little earlier than that. I would trace it to 1620, to the Mayflower. One could, I suppose, trace it in different parts even earlier than.
One could, you suppose, trace it in different parts even earlier. Like one might say 1619, for example. Weird.
That. But in any case, wherever you trace it to, the men who came there broadly were Christian. They certainly came from a Christian culture. And where Americans have long found their origin is in the Mayflower, among men who were extraordinarily zealous separatist Christians. In fact, I'm not an academic historian or even a trained apologist or theologian. I am a cigar salesman, and I've named my cigar company Mayflower after those very men, some of my ancestors.
Michael Knowles has a cigar company? Oh my god. What is even happening here? I feel like maybe linking like tobacco products with the Mayflower sends a pretty not great message. Uh Yep, nope. This is his personal cigar company. He describes it as his personal cigar company. All right. Well, that's weird. Just out of curiosity, I went on Reddit to see what people were saying about the cigar. Uh, has anyone tried the Mayflower line from Michael Knowles? IMO overpriced, supposed something special cigar. To my palate, I think just average blend, trending on limited availability and offering at high prices. Hope to cash in on those who seek exclusives. Yeah. God.
Were on that boat, and they made it quite clear that they were in the United States on a religious project, the country that would become the United States, on a religious project. And then the Puritans who followed the Pilgrims were had slight distinctions from them theologically, but were broadly the same. And so Governor John Winthrop of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, he declared that America would be a shining city on a hill in a famous speech called A Model of Christian Charity. And all the way up through the Revolution, Americans considered themselves to be Christian. The founding fathers were a little bit of a hodgepodge of Freemasons and deists, but there were a number of vaguely faithful seeming Christians among them. And even the ones who were not particularly orthodox in their Christianity, at least recognize the importance of Christianity to the country. So you have
Yeah, they recognized that religious belief was definitely important, but there was a reason why instead of just drafting into the Constitution like explicitly Christian ideals, they used secular ones instead. You might argue that it's due to like political expediency, but what we wind up having is the document we wind up having, not if you read between the lines, it's secretly a Christian nationalist document. No. You have to go on what's actually written in the documents.
a founding father, author of the Federal.
Which, I feel like is what conservatives have been arguing about for like, arguing for, ironically, for like the last 30, 40 years since they came up with the concept of originalism. So, weird divergence from your central argument here.
Federalist Papers, and the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court's John Jay, he said that Christianity must be the religion of the United States. He thanked God that the country had the same religion, were descended from the same stock. He went so far as to say,
by the way, there is absolutely no way that people considered like America to be homogeneously Christian. Because like here's the thing. Europe had like 1,000 years of like wars and skirmishes between different like Protestant and Catholic groups. And then Protestantism just continued to fracture into smaller and smaller, sects. And like that continued in America. Like you had Congregationalists, you had Episcopalians, you had Anglicans, you had all kinds of different Protestant groups, not all of which got along. This would not have been viewed as homogenous. The same way that like at the time, people didn't view, folks that today we would consider white as like relatively homogenous as white. Instead, they would be like, oh, you have your real white people, the Anglo-Saxons, and then you have all of your fake, swarthy whites, the people from Sweden and Norway. They're not real whites. Like the level of racism we were operating on in 1776 really can't be overstated. And that level of factionalism also applied to feelings between like religious groups. I mean, for crying out loud, you can like look at like for example, in the book To Kill a Mockingbird, which is about like, Jim Crow South, they talk in the book about this division between like two different Christian sects within Protestantism. They talk about like the conflict in the town between these two groups of people, and that was in Jim Crow, the Jim Crow South. We're talking like 300 years before that. Wait, Mayflower cigars are rebranded and marked up Olivia cigars? Or Oliva cigars, which are actually pretty decent cigars considering it's a vanity brand. I was expecting much worse. But you're still getting like robbed out of your money. Huh. Anyway, let's go back to this.
That non-Christians should never hold public office. Now, there's no religious test for office in the Constitution, but there are religious parameters around the country. So if you go back to the philosophical founding document, the Declaration, it begins and predicates.
Oh, okay. So basically, Michael Knowles pivots to what he considers his best argument, which is that the Constitution is philosophically Christian, which is one of the vaguest concepts I've ever heard, and that's what he's going to open up with for his foundational argument. This is interesting.
The nation on the notion that all men are created equal and endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. So I'm not trying to convince you here that this is a papal bull or this is, some particularly sectarian version of Christianity. But at the very least, the nation, I think we all would have to agree, is predicated on the notion that God exists and created us and gave us rights. And then in practice, America developed far more clearly in a Christian manner. So much so.
I don't know that in Christianity that God gave people any rights. Like I know that like he gave people like laws and commandments. I don't know that he gave people rights per se. I feel like this is a mangling of Christian concepts in order to arrive at his preordained conclusion.
So that in our national anthem, in the little heard final verse, the final stanza, Francis Scott Key writes, "Conquer we must when our cause is just, and this be our motto, and God is our trust," and it's inscribed on our money, and it's in our Pledge of Allegiance. So, I think one can quibble over quite how orthodox or rigorous the Christianity of America was, but it's simply an historical fact that it was Christian men who were motivated by Christian ideas, who created Christian institutions, who founded the country, whether it was consciously Christian or not.
And
again, but it needs to be consciously Christian if you're going to start attributing like validity to Christian nationalist movements, which Michael Knowles does. Like, I think to a degree here, he's hiding his power level and hiding his actual goals,
Quibble we shall. We'll get back to Michael Knowles in just a moment, but first, I've got an exciting announcement. I want to invite you to join me and others in person for 2 days of discussions and debate, all happening at the inaugural Dissident Dialogues of 20.
Oh boy. That's gonna this is gonna be a wellspring of transphobia. God. Okay. Anyway, go watch this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to Alex O'Connor's channel, do that stuff, do the things. Time to go hang out with friendos. You have a good time, Ms. Milena.
2024. It's taking place in Brooklyn, New York on the 3rd and 4th of May.
I'm going to make you watch this ad because Alex O'Connor is cool.
2024, and as well as me will feature the likes of Richard Dawkins, Steven Pinker, Ayan Hirsi-Ali, Chris Williamson, Konstantin Kisin, Francis Foster, and more. Dissident Dialogues is an opportunity to Konstantin Kisin.
Just out of curiosity, Brianna Joy Gray is there. I thought I saw that name. Oh boy. Kathleen Stock. Yeah, this is about par for the course that I was expecting.
Francis Foster, and more. Dissident Dialogues is an opportunity to join the conversation with influential thinkers where everyone, conservatives, progressives, religious, atheist, left, right, and everything else,
Entrama, you may.
is welcome. We'll be tackling the important topics like religion, science, politics, and culture. So if these sound up your street, Dissident Dialogues is the place for you. Buy your tickets now at dissidentdialogues.org and be a part of the conversation. Now back to Michael Knowles. I think it's probably worth beginning. And by the way, I'm talking here
Paul
about the
Joseph
United
Watson
States
is
of
still
America. And I understand that it's useful to look historically at what precedes a nation to understand what that nation becomes. But we have quite good insights into the writings, the private thoughts, even from their letters and things, of the founders of the country that we now see today. So I think one of the most underrated, let's say, even though he is quite highly.
What is this?
Okay, guys, I have it. In my possession, I've finally got what is possibly, no, probably, guaranteed, the craziest banned notes app post / apology of all time. I don't know if it gets worse than this. What? Okay, how am I going to set this up? Music. Wiggly air. We all like it. We also like the people who make it. Sometimes it's a single person. Sometimes it's a group of people in a band. Throughout the history of music, bands have sometimes been known to have somewhat weird and toxic dynamics. And that is most definitely being exemplified here in this new, again, Notes app announcement from a hardcore band. By the way, really quick here, Austin and I are omitting all names and labels and identifying information from this story because it's really outlandish and
what on earth are we building up to here?
Even if the band did post this for all to see, it's not really the kind of thing you want to be associated with long term. So we figure it might just make sense to kind of just keep it about the story and not so much the people involved. A group that as of right now seems pretty small, really up and coming, but still a group of people sizable enough to where you want to do a bit of an announcement when you have a major change happening within the band, like a singer switch. When someone pivotal to the band's sound up until this point.
Oh, Anthony Fantano is a music reviewer. He's actually very good, and I like him. And he follows the Twitch channel, actually.
Is departing. We have decided to part ways with our vocalist Diego due to admission of very disturbing and concerning behavior towards one.
Yeah, nah. This is fucking crazy. Yeah. Okay. I don't know that we need to go over the entire note here, but I'm just gonna summarize. Yeah, they're basically in this hardcore band. There was a guy who liked the lady another guy was dating, and rather than be an adult about it and put on his big boy pants, he instead started trying to dose this other band member with HRT, with estrogen, in order to make him less manly, so that his lady friend would then date him. And I don't know who any of these people were that were involved in this. I don't even, frankly, I don't even know if this is a real story. I genuinely have no idea. But the HRT doping went on for like 5 months, caused a ton of pretty bad health problems. And then was discovered after the guy who was doing it got drunk and admitted to it, and got kicked out of the band. But hey, if you like the lady someone else is dating, go and date a different lady that you also like. Don't be a weirdo and poison someone over it? That's weird. That's weird. I know, mind-blowing stuff here. Don't poison people. Yeah, the gender unaffirming care. Yeah. The story seems really fake. They really just hand-waved where the hell Diego supposedly got estrogen and progesterone to dope it with. True. Don't be a weirdo. Why aren't hardcore bands force-femming me right now? Jesus. Anyway. I don't think I'm not saying Anthony Fantano made up the story. But I think he's reacting to the same thing like I saw floating around on social media, you know? But anyway, back to this. Also, wait, before we go back, folks, if you've been enjoying the stream, we've been going for 2 hours now. Remember to hit the follow button on Twitch, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, hit the like button on the YouTube stream, and please, please, please consider dropping some subs and donos. Beep, boop, boop, boop. Oh, God. My name is Diego, and I'm a singer. Legit, every streamer has talked about this. I have to be like, what the fuck did I do? Oh, God. Did Israel launch their bombing campaign in the ground invasion in Rafah? I mean, to my knowledge, they've been bombing the area around Rafah and probably within Rafah already. They haven't launched the ground invasion yet, but Netanyahu said that he's going to ignore that Joe Biden said that doing a ground invasion of Rafah is a red line, and he's going to do it anyway, which sets up a showdown between Netanyahu and Biden, and frankly, that's definitely a lot of progress on, of leftist pressure on Joe Biden. Ghetto Spock!
Oh wow, I guess I did kinda don't know, haha.
Thank you for subscribing over on Twitch. I appreciate it. Thank you. And I was just about to ask people to dono and sub. Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you for helping me to live and keep making content. It's been a terrible week for me. This and Toriyama, my heart can't take it. I'm sorry to hear that. Sweet Miss Music. You deserve only good things. Yeah, but Forlorn, there's no way for them to do a ground invasion of Rafah without, like, mass civilian casualties. Beep, boop, 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 boop. All right, let's continue. Salmon Moose.
Do you know Crufts is on? They are the true dono dogs.
I don't know what Crufts is. What is it? I know I asked you yesterday, but I don't remember the answer. Thank you for the 2 gifted tier 1 subs. Bringing the BWA energy up today to a sorely needed level. Thank you very much, Salmon Moose. Crufts is the big dog show? Oh, that sounds lovely. Thank you. A life without Crufts. It's true. I do live that life. I do not have that dog in me, it turns out. It's like the Olympics for dogs? Huh. Okay. It's the big doggy show. Boop, 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 boop. All right. Moving on with this Michael Knowles debate. Oh my god.
Red Jack needs food and other necessities badly. BWA.
It's true. Red Jack needs food. Thank you for the $60 dono, Paladin. My God. Your support to this channel literally means like so much, and I really appreciate it. The BWA energy is big with Paladin. Truly the largest bohage among all. Bohage in chief. Here we go. We're going back into this. You guys can't distract me forever. You tricky dickies. Here we go.
Rated of the founding fathers is, of course, Thomas Paine, without whom the revolution may not have taken place. I mean, it's often said that Thomas Paine is the author of the
With
revolution.
your charm and intellect,
and,
Salmon Moose.
This is because he writes Common
And
Sense.
you do have
which
both.
is during a time when many people in the colonies were really just looking for better representation. The idea of actual revolution and independence was not as inevitable as a lot of people may think. Thomas Paine writes Common Sense and convinces a lot of people that actually maybe independence is the goal here. And I think to this day, Common Sense is still the greatest selling American pamphlet. Now, and it's still in print, of course. He's not just the author of the American Revolution, though, of course.
I should have made it the sexy number to begin with. BWA.
Oh God! Thank you for the $9 dono, bringing your total to 69, the nicest number of all. And just want to say shout out to those of you who are liking the stream. We are currently only 6 likes short of 69 likes on the stream. Do your due diligence, folks. Also, wait, Foxbat, Foxbat. This is not Paul Joseph Watson. This is not Paul Joseph Watson, okay? I understand, but you have to understand this guy lacks Alex O'Connor lacks Paul Joseph Watson's DSLs. Okay? There's not the same. Two different men. And this guy
Had a
actually has
stressful
good
weekend.
politics.
Saw Jack went live. It made my night. Spread the BWA and come over to riverboat.gg. If you're not already, we don't bite, unless you ask.
Gamer G, thank you for the 2 gifted tier 1 subs, and I'm glad that I could make your night by going live tonight. Yeah, the two different men. One with lips that have been mocked for a very long time, given his anti-gay rhetoric, and the other a wholesome atheist being, as far as I know.
He's also the author of a text known as The Age of Reason, which espouses, sure, a philosophical deism. He says in no uncertain terms right at the beginning that he believes in one God, but also describes organized religions, including Christianity, as essentially conspiracies
lips that ancient Greek stories were written for. Yeah, the Greeks literally invented written language in their area of the world to catalog those lips. Am I right, folks?
to conduct power and to hold monopolies over people. And in fact, this leads him into a great deal of controversy. He ends up narrowly escaping execution. He gets exiled. He dies, and then when his bones are dug up to be brought back over to England, they end up getting lost, and we still don't know where his bones are today. And about 6.
I can too continue to distract you. Fun fact, I've been outright told on dating apps that my intellect is intimidating.
Well, Salmon Moose, first of all, thank you for the 2 gifted tier 1 subs. I appreciate them. And second of all, you are extraordinarily intelligent, so I understand that feedback. But also, you got charisma, okay? You got the riz. And or you need to find an autistic trans girl who likes trains and will love to swap like facts with you. Let's see. most people would be intimidated by a hybrid of a salmon and a moose. It's true. The sheer verticality of a salmon and the intellectual dominance of the moose fused into one. Kiko Corgi, thank you for the $2 super chat. Putting YouTube over there on the board. I appreciate that. All right, here we go.
6 people attended his funeral. And yet this man is the author of the American Revolution. Now, why is it that at the end of his life, he's treated with such disregard and contempt? It might have something to do with the fact...
We do all love trains. I, for one, am very autistic and love trains.
That his own personal religious beliefs were, in no uncertain terms, not Christian. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that America is a legally secular nation. It doesn't mean that Thomas Paine is not an anomaly among the founding fathers, but in the way that we can say, okay, the founding document of America, maybe the Declaration of Independence, not a legal document. I mean, the Declaration of Independence is not supposed to be legislation. It doesn't protect any rights. It doesn't establish any courts. It doesn't do anything other than act as a polemic, essentially, against not just monarchy, but the specific king.
Well,
so
just on that point, I mean, I'm
sure.
Quite interested in many of the things you've said, and I'm not surprised that a British atheist would choose a Brit, a very liberal Brit,
mention Thomas Paine
as his favorite founding father. But you know, there was some
they,
legal.
They were all British. At the time, they were all British, Michael. They lived in a British colony, Michael. They considered themselves British.
Force to the Declaration, which is that the Declaration told King George that they were separating. So I agree with you. It's a different sort of document than the Constitution. Though Abraham Lincoln later then in the 19th century elevates, again, the Declaration of Independence to the level of, I think, a more significant founding document. But it does have some legal bearing in as much as it kicked the whole thing off.
Yeah, it's treasonous. I mean, I mean, literally treasonous in the sense that if I write a document right now that says something illegal, which can happen in the United Kingdom, this would have sort of legal relevance, let's say. But the Declaration is clearly supposed to be a mixture of. It's supposed to draw upon law and history and also rhetoric. It's supposed to uplift and inspire a nation to revolution, which is sort of what it did and what it does. But when you get to the actual legal document, it takes a little bit more time and a few more people to throw together. Interestingly, by the way, one of Thomas Jefferson's earliest...
It is fascinating to me that, like, Michael Knowles' argument here is essentially like, well, the Declaration of Independence was, one of the foundational spiritual, philosophical documents of the United States. And Alex O'Connor's like, but it's not like a legal document, right? It has no bearing on like the actual country that would be created after that in the documents and laws and such.
Drafts.
Well, in Bread and the Toast, this is what you need to understand about Michael Knowles is that this is his home turf. He has a degree in history. He has a degree in Latin. Or Italian, I believe, and this is what he studied. Like this is what he's all about. So if he can't even perform on this front, like my goodness,
the Declaration of Independence doesn't mention a creator. It does say that that men and women are endowed by that they are created equal. But it doesn't say that they're endowed by a creator. It's only sort of Congress in later editing that document that gets added in. But look, I'll grant it to you. Fine. The Declaration of Independence has a creator. It's still not Christian, by the way. And of course, if a Christian writes the creator, they're probably talking about the Christian creator. But the whole point of America and the reason that the founders were so genius is because they recognized that
this is his
not
strength,
everybody
Robert
living in the country and not everybody who goes on to rule the country are going to share.
You might not like it, but this is Michael Knowles at the peak of his powers. Okay, that this is the one thing he claims to know anything about with authority.
their political opinions. And so they were very clear about what kind of political views and what kind of political tests somebody must pass and which ones must not be relevant. And we know that religious belief is not one of those, especially when we look at the Constitution and find that the only times religion is mentioned is twice. Firstly, in saying that no religious test, that there should be no religious test to any public office in the United States, and secondly, in the later added Bill of Rights, protecting the free exercise of religion. And so I suppose what I'm asking is, when we look at the actual legal texts here, I understand the idea that referring to a creator in the Declaration of Independence, maybe Congress had the Christian God in mind. Maybe they didn't. I mean, some of these founders were, as you say, I mean, you said it was a hodgepodge. That's putting it lightly. Thomas Jefferson famously cuts out all references to the divinity of Christ from his Gospels. Like, where are we getting this specifically Christian idea at the founding of America from, and not just some kind of vague deism that may have even...
See, this is an interesting question to pose to Michael Knowles, because Michael Knowles thrives on just making this vague gesture to vague concepts and never nailing himself down to any one of them, you know? So I'm interested to see here, because like kind of how he responds to Alex over the course of this debate, because Alex is a philosophy debater. Like, he will nail down on specifics here because the specifics matter. Michael Knowles will just ignore his point. I mean, we'll see, I guess.
Only been referenced in the first place in a rhetorical attempt to inspire people to revolution.
Well, I totally grant that Thomas Jefferson had some problems. I'm not denying it. I mean, Thomas Jefferson was one of, if not the most liberal of the founding fathers. And then you mention Thomas Paine, who I wouldn't count really as a founding father, but he did write the pamphlet that kicked off a lot of revolutionary sentiment.
Wikipedia would disagree with you there.
Listen, you limeys, I don't know what you're doing to our founding fathers, but that man I consider separate. But he's obviously is extremely important, and he was quite radical. You know, if we're picking our favorite Brits who were in favor of America in one way or the other, I would have to side with the great Edmund Burke, who took a great deal of issue with Thomas Paine. But perhaps we can get to him a little bit later. When it comes to the Declaration, we don't need to wonder too much about what these guys thought about the creator, because we do have some of their writings. And John Adams, who served in the Continental Congress.
Yeah, no, guys. Thomas Paine doesn't count because arbitrarily Michael has decided he's British, unlike the other founding fathers who were also British.
And then was the second president and was a political foe of Thomas Jefferson, said, and the man, by the way, was not particularly orthodox in his Christianity, but he said that we all agreed that the general principles for the revolution on which we could achieve national independence would be the general principles of Christianity. So he speaks about Christianity broadly. He's speaking on behalf of his fellows in the Continental Congress and the Founding Fathers. Even as you say, if Jefferson didn't, he was a little reluctant to include the word creator. He ultimately acquiesced, and it's a document not just of single authorship by Jefferson, but it's a statement by this incipient country. So you see that there, but you see it elsewhere also. You see it in the Federalist Papers. Again, not exactly reading like an encyclical or a papal bull, but the Federalist Papers, specifically James Madison, do cite God directly by name. And then you have the Constitution. You mentioned the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights, which says that there will be the free exercise of religion. There will be no establishment of a church. This is quite misunderstood in modern day because...
Yeah, but like, again, it's this vague hand waving towards, well, the majority of them who did this were Christians, so that makes it a Christian government, and that's just not the case. This is like saying this cup was manufactured in Vatican City, and therefore that makes this a Christian cup. Like, no, it doesn't. Actually, that's not how that works.
Some people take this to mean that either there can be no church established anywhere in the United States, or they would go even further and say that the country would be secular.
Why do
and
you
would
own a
be
Catholic cup?
absent
You know,
from religion? And this would have been completely
it's full of holy water.
unheard of to the framers of the Constitution. In fact, the chief political reason for the refusal to establish a church at the national level is that there already were churches established at the state level. There were a number of them, and they persisted for decades after the ratification of the Constitution. So no one would have understood that to be.
I don't know what he's talking about here, so let's take a look. Like what? Oh God. Oh God. State level churches, America. Let's see here. State churches in British North America prior to the Revolution. So, Protestant colonies, Catholic colonies. Okay. Oh. Well, I guess this makes sense. I didn't really think about it, but I guess it makes sense that most of these churches would be the Church of England, like the Anglican Church. That does make the most sense here, I guess. Oh God. Yeah, no, this is this idea I think is flawed. These are all the years they were disestablished. North Carolina abolished the Church of England as an official like state religion in 1776. Connecticut held on until 1818. As far as I can tell here, the latest it goes is 1818, and that's Connecticut. All of the rest are like disestablished within like 4 to 10 like 10 years after the after the revolution. Again, largely because they're Anglican churches, the official Church of England, and I, for a number of reasons, can think of a few cases why the English might not have been beloved in America at the time. But I think his argument here is pretty weak now that we've looked at just like some of the timelines we're working with here. Constitution is 1791. Well, so Connecticut wasn't the Church of England. It was the Congregational Church, which I don't know that much about. They're Protestant Calvinist churches. Gotcha. Oh, well, and this also makes a bit of a difference. These are Protestant churches in the Reformed Calvinist tradition practicing congregational government in which each congregation independently and autonomously runs its own affairs. So literally in the case of Connecticut, this is like the organizational structure of the denomination doesn't even lend itself to like a state church.
Unconstitutional or contrary to the spirit of the new nation. If so,
Hey,
the
trans girl
Constitution
Jade.
never would have been ratified. Now, later on, again, bringing Lincoln back into it, in the middle of the 19th century, you get, or later 19th century, you get the 14th Amendment, which then incorporates the Bill of Rights to the states.
Yeah,
and
Calvinists be crazy.
probably precludes any chance that we would have of having state establishments ever again. But now we're fast forwarding over 150 years. At least at the beginning of the country, it was not understood as having a firm separation of church and state, no matter what Thomas Jefferson might have longed for in a private letter.
Yes, well, of course, that's often referred to, and I know we must be careful not to conflate the, let's say, private interpretations of the founders of what the Constitution said and what the Constitution either actually literally says or what it should perhaps be understood to say. I mean, the Establishment Clause doesn't just, it seems to me, preclude the ability to have an established church. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. It seems much more broad than this, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. It seems to be a protection both of private religious belief and also, or I should say, both a protection of private religious belief, but also a preclusion of the government to legislate in any way that respects an establishment of religion, not
But
just
again,
establishing some state church.
The key here, though, is the Congress part. Congress shall make no
Oh
law.
God, Mr. Miyagi, I didn't even make note of it, and now that you pointed it out, I can't unsee it. Michael Knowles' 5 o'clock shadow is hideous. Oh my God.
Because it's very easy to look back with the current.
Wait, it is now no more than toleration. It is now no more that toleration is spoken of as it were the indulgence of one class of people against another, enjoyed the exercise of their inherent natural rights, for happily the government of the United States, which gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens in giving it on all occasions their effectual support. George Washington, 1790. Yeah.
Mode of
Woke George
jurisprudence and
Washington over
constitutional
here.
law, and impose that on the Continental Congress, or I'm sorry, on the Constitutional Convention. But that was just not what.
Oh, Squidus, I don't know. I don't know the steps to subscribe with Prime. Maybe you already used it on another channel. I have no idea.
What was that? It was another dog's traction.
Salmon Moose, thank you for the 2 gifted tier 1 subs. Thank you. Guys, it genuinely means so much to me. Like when you guys take the time to sub and dono. Like my God. Thank you very much, Salmon Moose. Subs for the sub gods, donos for the dono dogs. Let's go. How is this a debate? I mean, so far, Michael Knowles isn't really putting up much of a fight, and it's pretty interesting that it goes on for an hour after this. Because right now, I'm feeling like we're in Simpsons stop, he's already dead territory, but I feel like it's going to get worse somehow.
The phrase meant at that time, or for many decades afterward. Congress could make no law doing those things, because the states could do that, and the states did that, and the states had plenty of religious laws. We had blasphemy laws on the books in the United States until very, very recently, and the churches did have established, or rather, the states had established churches. So, if we're talking about some protection of an individual right.
I mean, Michael, if you're going to make that argument, we have states that also said that like indigenous and black people weren't full citizens. We have states where those laws are still on the books. Like, is your argument that like, oh well, that's evidence that is that America's a racist country? Because I feel like you'd push back against that quite a bit. But you'll make the same argument happily when it suits your purpose. Whereas, the correct position is that America is not a Christian nation, legally or effectively, and also that, black and brown and indigenous people deserve full rights in American society.
To believe whatever he wants. That's just not there. The Constitution was far more limited. And when we're talking about something like the First Amendment, what we're actually seeing here is a restriction on the right of the Congress to make these sorts of declarations.
So how about this then? The United States, at least at its founding, was at the federal level a secular nation.
I wouldn't say secular, really. I mean, I would say it It did not have an established church. And I would say it did not take a sectarian side in things. The founding fathers and the framers were all pretty focused on that. But I just don't think it would have meant very much to anyone, especially considering that we're talking about a federal system here.
It wouldn't have meant very much to anyone. What, Michael?
So you can't just view the federal government absent the state governments or absent the rights of the people, for that matter. One of the ironies here, as we're debating the supposedly secular foundation of the country, is the best description I've ever seen of the American government, which came to the founding fathers either directly or implicitly.
We're listening to. I don't know if Alex O'Connor is a leftist. Just that he, generally defends like the rights of like trans people and like pushes back on a lot of right wing propaganda. So yeah, check out Alex O'Connor. I like his YouTube channel, so that's where I'm at on him.
Through other thinkers, is the description of perfect government by St. Thomas Aquinas in the Summa Theologiae, which says that there will be not merely a monarchy, but there will be a monarchical element, a strong executive, and then an aristocratic element, and then
okay, but like Thomas Aquinas isn't relevant here to this discussion. You're just like throwing out feelers to other famous characters throughout history. Like you could say that like it was so impactful and important that Dickens wrote Ebenezer Scrooge to tell people that you should help the poor. It was a really, really big thing. We're all Scroogites here in America. Like, what are you talking about? Like, this is a nonsensical, spurious argument.
Democratic element, representation for the people. And so in the American system, as it was founded, we've decayed a little bit since then, I'm sorry to say, that's exactly what you have. You have the thumotic element in the executive, which could have been a hereditary king, or at least an elected king. Alexander Hamilton argued to some degree for that.
He did.
And then we have the aristocratic element, and then obviously there's a strong democratic element. But it confuses a lot of modern liberals, including Americans, because they say, we're a democracy and democracy is at stake, and whatever. Our buildings are temples of democracy. But obviously there's quite a lot to the American system that is not democratic, and it's because they were trying to balance all these different types of regime, as well as balance different types of power, the power of the national government, which confusingly we call the federal government, even though federal refers to all of these different layers and protections for the states, and then obviously the state power, and then the individual rights as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, I suppose I do want to talk about Thomas Jefferson and his wall of separation, but look, I mean, suppose that we were trying on this hypothesis that America is explicitly a secular nation, and that's what the founders intended. You might ask, okay, could the language not have been a bit clearer? Maybe. But I could ask the same question in the other direction, because really the question of whether America is a secular nation, I think, should best be framed as, is it a religious nation or not? If it's not, then what are we left with? And if the claim is that it's a Christian nation...
I really like how he's able to cut through Michael Knowles's, like, pretty vague argument here in order to, like, try and nail down specifics. I really appreciate that about him.
I could ask similarly, what's with the complete and utter lack of any reference to God, let alone Christ or Christianity or anything of that sort in the Constitution? If the founders quite clearly, in their private letters, were saying to each other, yes, this is certainly Christian, which also I don't even think is true. I think that for every example you have of a founder talking about the Christian basis of America, you can find even sometimes the same founders saying the opposite.
See, like, notice how he's able to deliver this rebuttal in, like, a very measured way. And that means, like, Michael Knowles has to respond in kind, and that's actually a really difficult position to put Michael Knowles in. He really has to rub his brain cells together for a few of those, like, neural sparks.
For example, famously, John Adams signs the Treaty of Tripoli, which says that the government of the United States is not in any way founded on the Christian religion. Now, you're probably going to want to say something like, now, I don't know, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but look, this is the Treaty of Tripoli, right? This is he's quite clearly just writing to some Muslims, trying to...
Hey, Plasma Links, you called it.
to, calm
Stop them
the
from
tides.
taking our sailors. Also negotiated
right.
by a Jeffersonian diplomat.
Quite right, indeed, as well. And so, okay, sure. In fact, why don't I avoid putting words in your mouth and tell me what you make of this Treaty of Tripoli, in which we have those words. I'll repeat them. I will underline them and underline them again. The government of the United States is in no way founded on the Christian religion. How do you explain
Shai
that one?
Halud.
Oh, well, I explain it.
I've never made the connection between Michael Knowles and Michael Tracy, but they are both the worst Michaels. So it makes sense that they would be connected in that way.
Exactly as you just have, which is it's the Treaty of Tripoli, okay? And these Muslim pirates were stealing our sailors, and we wanted it to come to an end. And it's not even as though John Adams negotiated this directly.
Yeah, see here, he's just going to be arguing that, this was just a lie. America lied for political expedience. People's lives were on the line. It was okay to lie, and America really is secretly a Christian nation. That's his argument here.
In fact, tellingly, I think it was negotiated by an acolyte of Jefferson, a Jeffersonian diplomat. And so, but all of that to say, I don't really dismiss your point. You're right that there was some confusion among the founding fathers, and they certainly didn't found the country as hierocratic or theocratic or anything like that. Theocracy just being government by clerics. Certainly it isn't. Though I am skeptical of your suggestion that for every pro-Christian point that I could find in the Federalist Papers or the Declaration, or at least implicit in the Declaration, or in the private correspondence of John Adams or Madison, for that matter, that you could find another point on the other side. I agree. You can find a lot of confusing.
Notice how Michael Knowles literally, like, Alex just calmly is like, "You are full of shit, sir. There's not." I would posit that you can't actually produce all of these private communications that are secretly affirming that America is a Christian nation. And Michael Knowles in response has to be like, I mean, I agree. You can find a lot of confusing language, like as if to indicate that, like, Alex was simply confused about the lack of evidence, despite Michael Knowles not producing any more evidence. It's actually quite funny to watch him wriggle like this.
Messages and even contradictions there. But I think the evidence is overwhelmingly on the side of Christianity in some form or another. So yes, you're right. The president signs a prudential treaty to preserve some of our sailors, and he tries to assuage the Muslims because he knows the only way to get them to stop is to say, we're not really a Christian nation, don't worry. But I think that that little treaty with those random little Muslim pirates taken against all of the other documents and the whole century and a half of American history that we've cited, it doesn't quite hold up. I think there are better arguments for secularism.
I think that little treaty, signed and directed towards that random little British king is also not particularly relevant here, especially given that you just said.
Hold on.
Kapow! Alex O'Connor with the gut punch.
Christianity.
You're telling me that the Declaration of Independence and the Treaty of Tripoli are on equal standing and significance to American history? You don't believe that?
No, I don't believe that. What I do believe is that they're both equally relevant to the present conversation, because you said a moment ago, it was quite funny how you said, I dispute this claim that you say that every reference I have to Christianity in the letters of Thomas Jefferson, in the Federalist Papers, in the Declaration of Independence, and then stopped yourself and said, or I suppose, implied by the Declaration of Independence, because you pick an example where Christianity is not mentioned at all.
This is a great follow-up punch. Like, why are you picking? You're trying to say that your best example of America being a Christian nation is the Declaration of Independence, where, like, Christianity isn't even mentioned, and your argument then is that there's, it's literally like the national treasure argument. On the back of the Constitution is a secret. On the back of the Declaration of Independence is actually a secret message about how America is secretly Christian. I'm gonna call it the national treasure argument. Okay, and we should really run with this label. I think it's good. But the national treasure argument is like it's a secret third thing that you just you haven't ever considered because of the lack of evidence.
Cool. It doesn't get a mention. And what I want
God
to
is
say is that although
but it's
although
implicit. The Christianity is implicit. I agree.
the creator is mentioned, I'll give you that much. Which,
Well, it's not Ahura Mazda. We're not talking about some demiurge or something. I mean, presumably these men are talking about some creator, at least.
I love that like he's like but the word is creator. It's not Jesus Christ. It's not you know explicitly the Christian God. It just says creator, and that could refer to literally a creative force, a scientific force. Could talk about like the idea of like polytheistic religion. Like it could be any of the world's religions, really. It's not it's not the same thing. There's nothing in the document that leads you to Michael Knowles' conclusion, but he wants you to believe that there is, so that you will get on board with his Christian nationalist agenda.
Vaguely resembling the Christian God.
I'm going to imagine so too. However, I would say I'd refer to what I said a moment ago, which is that the founding fathers were geniuses in this regard of knowing exactly how much of their own worldview to put into the words on the page. So, although they may have been thinking of a Christian God, it may be that they think to themselves, well, let's write this in such a way that if you don't have the same view of God that I do, you can still identify with this document, especially given that the founding fathers had completely...
This is the most reasonable argument given the writings of the founding fathers and also given the wording of the document itself. That this is the most reasonable conclusion.
And utterly different views of God, even just amongst the company that ended up making up the Constitutional Convention. But the reason that I'm drawing a comparison here to the Treaty of Tripoli is because, of course, the Declaration of Independence is... I mean, they don't have the Treaty of Tripoli, in Washington, D.C.
Halls of
behind
Congress,
4 inches of
National
bulletproof glass.
Right.
Yeah. But the point that the way that you say, well, yeah, okay, so John Adams was writing that America isn't Christian, but he was just doing this essentially as a rhetorical tool to help serve the political end. That's maybe what I'm suggesting is happening in the Declaration of Independence. It's more relevant because, of course, it's the Declaration of Independence. But in the same way that when I was saying a moment ago, the Declaration of Independence is just this document that's supposed to inspire what is a predominantly Christian nation to revolution, he's going to say, yeah, endowed by their creator, even though really, that maybe isn't what he privately thinks, but he writes it because he's trying to achieve a political end.
I think
so in the same way that John Adams does that with the Treaty of Tripoli, the difference is that in the Treaty of Tripoli, John Adams specifically references Christianity, and in the Declaration of Independence,
sure.
Jefferson does
so
not.
I think you've just...
Well, and also it doesn't matter what the intent was at the time, because the people who wrote those are long dead. We can't ask them what they meant. And frankly, that means we're left with the politically expedient texts that they left behind. If you want to play this game of like political expediency, the caving to political expediency washes away your assumed intent. Like if we're assuming the intent here was a Christian nation building, right? Then the deference to, it was just because it was politically expedient. They just lied because it was politically expedient. You need to find evidence that it was a lie. You need to find evidence to show the lie. If you're not doing that, then we're just supposed to take your assumption because why?
Made my point though accidentally, which is we have to consider who the Treaty of Tripoli is designed to persuade, a bunch of foreign Muslim pirates, and who the Declaration is designed to persuade. It's addressed to King George, but it's obviously to persuade the American colonists. So why is it that the Continental Congress believed that they had to appeal to broadly religious red Christian principles to persuade the Americans. It's because they were broadly religious and, in fact, Christian. And they write about this too. So if your argument is some of these founding fathers, they might have pretended to be a bit more Christian than they actually were, I think you're probably right about that. But I think that also kind of proves my point, because when we talk about whether or not America is a Christian nation, I'm not even particularly concerned with the idle musings of Thomas Jefferson or even John Adams, who I prefer to Thomas Jefferson.
Which is interesting, because you're making a claim that can only really be validated by giving an intense amount of credence to all of these people and their writings, showing their true intent. But now you're saying, oh, well, I don't even care about what they say, which means you don't care about the actual evidence. You're just spinning a conspiracy out of your ass whole cloth.
I'm more concerned about that lowercase c constitution. What kind of a country is this really in practice, beyond the declarations of a president or two, or even some of the elected representatives who perhaps have different views than most people? And I think this really gets us to Alexis de Tocqueville, who observes that America has a chasm between the way that it talks and the way that it acts. America talks in this very liberal, modern, fashionable way, but they behave in this really conservative, traditional, openly religious way. America has always.
So now he's shifted the conversation from any type of like foundational document of America to, well, Americans have always behaved this way, but he's talking in this overly vague generality that does not actually represent all Americans. It's a pretty slimy tactic that I think is fairly obvious for everyone to see. Like, it's actually kind of embarrassing that he's even attempting this.
Been more religious than most of the West, and that's become especially true in recent years. And Tocqueville makes an interesting observation too.
And again, this also isn't true. Like, parts of America have been religious. There have certainly been tons of religious enclaves in America, but like overall religiosity in America is diverging from like the rest of the world is a relatively new phenomenon. It's a result of multiple religious revival movements in the United States, and like honestly, vague generalities is like the go-to weapon of apologists,
which is that he says America in the future will either follow secularism that exists. There's a little seed of secularism here. They will either follow that toward atheism, or they will follow the broad Christian culture toward the apotheosis of Christianity, which he said is Catholicism. Now, I think I've managed to upset every single person who's listening at this point, but Alexis de Tocqueville was a very wise man, and probably he has a point here.
So America is secretly a Catholic nation, not just a Christian nation, but a Catholic nation. Interesting.
That
it's all a secret third thing, chat.
The dissension that you're observing in the founding era. I think you're overstating the secular impulses here, but in any case, there was a little bit of that. Ideas.
No, the secular impulses were born out even among religious people supporting independence, specifically because they didn't want one faction or another coming out on top and screwing their particular religion over. It was an agreement of mutual necessity to continue their religious beliefs and practices.
Are going to follow themselves to a logical conclusion. So again, I'm not even arguing that America is a Christian nation, is now and ever shall be a Christian nation. I'm merely observing that America was founded as a Christian nation.
Okay, but like now we have to do the Jordan Peterson thing. When you say it was founded as a Christian nation, what do you mean? Because we've just spent the last 30 minutes talking about the foundational documents of America and how they don't back up your claim. And you also just finished talking about how you don't care about like the the musings of founding fathers, and how you're actually making an appeal to the general population wide beliefs of Americans at the time, and you haven't provided any data in this argument to back up either of those claims. My goodness. Yeah, the goalposts have been just been shifting right, left, 10 yards down, 20 yards back. It's been a madhouse out here. Here we go.
Going back in the early days of settlement, during the so-called founding era, it was still understood itself to be Christian. In the early century or two, century and a half of America, we understood ourselves to be Christian. And there has been a growing secularism and atheism that I think overstates the supposed secularism of the past.
I understand that the small c Constitution of America, at least with regards to its citizenry, let's say, it is historically certainly Christian. And I agree with you that that's why this reference to the Creator is put in the Declaration of Independence to persuade a majority religious. They're at least going to believe in a Creator, and when they hear the word Creator, they're going to think of Christianity. And you're also right that it's become something of a truism that, I mean, people say this all the time about the UK and the US. They say, isn't it funny how the UK is officially a Christian country with an established church, and yet in practice so secular, and America is legally
Michael
a secular
Knowles is
nation,
better
but
than
in
my night
practice
at
so
work.
religious.
So, have money, I guess? BWA?
I like that text-to-speech attempts the question mark inflection. It's pretty fun. Thank you for the $5 dono, very knifey duck.
But it seems like you're disputing even that, because you wouldn't describe the legal America as secular at all. Because in other words, I have no problem saying that, yes, Americans speak and act differently, as everybody does, and I would characterize that as, in the founding documents, affirming a secular nation, and yet maybe in practice acting incredibly religiously, still allowing courthouses or state houses to put the Ten Commandments outside, this kind of stuff, eventually adopting the motto of "In God We Trust," which, by the way, I mean, you mentioned that earlier, that only gets adopted in like the mid 20th century or something like that?
No, it's put into there's a common misconception. That motto is put into the what's it called? The Pledge of Allegiance, as a way to fight communism in the 20th century.
Yeah, but he's talking about the money. We only added "In God We Trust" on paper money in 1957.
But the motto itself long predates it. So we have the motto on our money, for instance.
Yeah.
But the motto comes from the Star Spangled Banner. It actually comes from the national anthem, which is
Yeah, but it was added to the money in the 1950s. I'm gonna go out on a limb here. I think that the phrase "In God We Trust" probably predated the Star Spangled Banner. Just going on a limb here.
is written in the middle of the 19th century by Francis Scott Key. Or I'm sorry, actually earlier than that. It comes from what it's referring to is the War of 1812. So the second battle with your country over there, and which we won, by the way. And so that final stanza says, "This be our motto, and God is our trust." That goes back to some of the earliest days of our country. It's not a song and an anthem about the Revolutionary War or even the French and Indian War, which predates it, but it is about the Second War of Independence. And so that idea had been long standing there. And so to your point, yes, America is practically more religious than any other country in the West. But even as a matter of law, we have been. And I guess the example I would point to, and the answer you would have to provide for the supposed secular founding, is how it is that we had, for decades after the ratification, the established churches at the state level in a number of the states.
We didn't. They were they were dissolved. They were destroyed in the lead up to the Constitution.
States, and how it is that we've had until very recently in American history blasphemy laws. If this were a proper secular atheistic nation with no lawmaking that respects religion, how is it that blasphemy laws could endure for most of our nation's history?
I think there are a few ways to answer that question. The first is to suggest. I mean, I suppose the first is to suggest that you're completely right, and that America
It's
is
my
not
favorite
a
way
secular
to
nation
conclude
and
it.
it's
Yeah.
entirely Christian. Fine, and I I can see it being clipped. You know, if you want to upload a clip of this conversation on your channel and it ends there, just with me saying, well, I suppose you may just be completely right. You know, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
There's going to be a
Um,
blurb on my next book. I suppose you're completely right, Alex O'Connor.
Yeah, well, we are doing something of an exercise in taking people's quotes out of context in this episode, it seems. Who's doing it more remains to be seen.
Yeah, like a lot of these phrases were added in like the 1950s, but like the idea of under God like predated that. I'm not saying it's more or less valid. I'm just saying like people use the phrase under God or like in God we trust prior to it being on our money.
The other answers might be, for example, that America is also ostensibly founded on notions of, I mean, look, the Declaration says that all men are created equal, and the man who writes those words owns hundreds of other people as private property in Virginia. Now, when somebody points, like I can point to Thomas Jefferson being a slave owner and writing in the founding documents of America that America is about equality. I would not say, therefore, that America isn't really about that. You know, they didn't really have that in mind when they were writing those documents. They didn't really think that people should be equal. I would say that they did mean that. It's just that in practice they failed to live up to their own standards, and that's what made America such a great country. Is that
Well,
they wrote.
I see that objection. I just think it's a little different than the blasphemy laws or, say, the blue laws, you know, the Sabbath laws, which we actually still have in large parts of the United States, at least in large parts of New England. Because in the case of Thomas Jefferson, you're saying, here's a man who had an ideal, but it's a fallen world and he's a fallen man and he failed to live up to it. That's true. That describes all of us to some degree. But here you're making a claim about the legal and political constitution of the country. And I'm pointing out that there are these laws throughout the country that have existed for most of our nation's history. There, it doesn't seem that it's just the matter of a few men failing to live up to their ideals. It raises this question, hold on, how did these laws get on the books in the first place? How were there established churches for decades after the ratification? How are there still blue laws and
Again, I feel like he's already been cooked on all of these topics. I've your goose is cooked, sir. You're just asking for it to be burnt. I don't understand.
with laws today? And why did no one challenge these laws as being un-American or contrary?
Because they were generally unenforced, and so being unenforced, people basically just forgot about them.
To the spirit of our country until relatively recently, until the 20th century. That seems to be the historical problem for the secularist side.
Yeah, well, on that latter point, the fact that people sort of failed to pick up on this, I think that this is sort of what I'm driving at with the point about Thomas Jefferson, is that when people when a government actually does have either an essence or a strict legal system which runs contrary to something which you like and something which you enjoy. So in this case, it would be Christianity. I mean, you could think to yourself, well, maybe America is a Christian nation, but most of the people living is not a Christian nation, but most of the people living in America were Christian. When there's like, a law that seems to respect the establishment of religion, it's not exactly a priority for people. People are not going to make a big song and dance about this because they're Christian and they don't mind it. But that doesn't change whether or not it was actually a legitimate law or not, if you see what I'm saying. Like the fact that people didn't challenge it.
So you're getting at a line of argument that I hear a lot of modern liberals argue about, not even just with regard to this question, but many political questions. And what you're saying is, look, the nation was established to be secular. That was what they were after. But you see, the people, they didn't quite understand it. They had these blind spots. It was maybe a little too advanced for them. So, they all remained Christian and kept doing what they were doing. And, actually the legislators, they didn't quite get it either. So they passed all these laws that established religious doctrines and practices at different levels of the government. And actually, even some of the states, they had churches and this and that. But it's because they didn't understand what the American Revolution was really about until 200 some odd years later, when Alex O'Connor, the great interpreter of the Founding Fathers, showed up, that limey from Great Britain, and he understood the true spirit of the Constitution. And it's not just you, and it's not even people in Britain. There are many American liberals who make this argument. They say, you don't understand, Michael. The Founding Fathers, the framers, the early American jurists, and basically everyone for 150 years, they didn't get the true meaning of the revolution until we liberals in 1962 discovered that there's a right to use condoms or something somewhere in the Constitution. And then they have a number of court cases on this point. Okay, I get the argument. It just seems like a bit of a Gnostic cult rather than a real legal and historical argument.
Well, for a start, I don't think that the separation of church and state is what the American Revolution was about. I think it may have been it's something that I think is established later on in the process of building a nation, just as many things are, and a lot of them are quite small or tangential. I think this is more significant than many of the things that go into the founding of America, but certainly much less significant than a great deal of other things. So
all right. On that note, folks, I didn't intend to speed it up like that. That was an accident. I'm actually going to be done for the night. We're gonna resume this in a part 2, baby.